Ready? Good evening. Welcome to the Hubbard County Planning Commission Board of Adjustment meeting for August 22nd, 2022. I'm going to start off by reading the meeting procedure. All persons in attendance at the Planning Commission Board of Adjustment meeting are expected to comply with the following meeting procedure. Thank you in advance for helping make this a manageable meeting. Copies of the agenda item materials are available for public viewing on the table located at the back of the meeting room. These materials are not to leave the table, so others in attendance may also view them. Please turn phones to vibrate off during the meeting and conduct any sidebar conversation outside the meeting room. Interruption or other interference with orderly conduct of the Planning Commission Board of Adjustment meeting will not be allowed. Defamatory or abusive remarks are always out of order. Disruptive persons will be removed from the meeting. The chair may terminate a speaker's privilege of address if, after being called to order, the speaker persists in improper conduct or remarks. Written materials concerning agenda items must be submitted to the Environmental Services Department by 3:30 p.m. on the Wednesday immediately prior to the meeting date. Written materials will not be accepted after this deadline or at the meeting because the Planning Commission Board of Adjustment will not have sufficient time to review them prior to the meeting. Such materials must state the agenda item for which it is being submitted and the name and address of the submitting party. Planning Commission business is conducted first, followed by Board of Adjustment business. The chair will call the meeting to order and explain the meeting procedure. The chair will read each agenda item into the record and ask applicant to come forward to the presenter's table, state his or her or their names and addresses for the record, and explain his, her, or their request. The Planning Commission Board of Adjustment will then discuss the agenda item with the applicant. The chair will then ask for public comment on the agenda item. To facilitate an orderly, efficient meeting, there is a 3-minute speaking time limit per speaker per agenda item unless the chair allows a speaker additional time. The chair may terminate the speaker's privilege of address if, after being called to order, the speaker persists in improper conduct or remarks. When the chair recognizes a speaker, she or he may approach the audience podium and microphone, state his or her full name and address for the record, and write such on the speaker log, and then share his or her comments. The audience podium microphone must be used by the recognized speaker because the meeting is recorded. A member of the public may not donate his or her speaking time to another speaker. A speaker should state his or her comments and address the issue, not the applicant. All comments are to be directed to the Planning Commission Board of Adjustment. Please do not repeat comments already made by previous speakers. The chair reserves the right to ask a group with similar comments to appoint a spokesperson. If written comments have been submitted to the Planning Commission Board of Adjustment, please do not read them aloud during the meeting, as they are already part of the record and copies thereof have been given to the Planning Commission Board of Adjustment. After everyone wanting to speak on an agenda item has done so, the chair will close for public comment period on the agenda item. No further public comment will be taken after this point. The chair will give the applicant an opportunity to address issues raised during public comment. The Planning Commission Board of Adjustment will then continue its discussion on the agenda item, and the chair will entertain a motion on it. The Planning Commission Board of Adjustment may make a motion to pass, deny, or table an item. Once the motion is made and seconded, the Planning Commission Board of Adjustment will develop findings of fact for conditional use permit and variance applications and then vote on the motion. Once a vote is taken on an agenda item, the Planning Commission Board of Adjustment will move on to the next agenda item. Meetings commence at 6 p.m. and continue until all agenda items have been heard or until 10 p.m. No new agenda items shall be considered after 9:45 p.m. The Planning Commission Board of Adjustment may at its discretion continue an item that is on the floor at 10 p.m. Any remaining agenda items shall be continued to another date time, preferably the immediately following Tuesday at 6 p.m., and no further public notice will be provided for such a meeting continuation. The Planning Commission Board of Adjustment, through the chair, may modify these procedures prior to a meeting or an agenda item. With that, we'll begin with Planning Commission and the approval of the August 22nd, 2022 meeting minutes.
This is Ken. I'll Make a motion to approve the minutes of the August 22nd Planning Commission meeting.
This is Mark, I'll second that.
I have a motion by Ken, a second by Mark to approve the minutes from the August 22nd, 2022 meeting. Timothy, how do you vote?
This is Timothy, I vote aye.
Mark, how do you vote?
This is Mark, I vote aye.
Ken, how do you vote?
This is Ken, I vote aye.
This is Mike, I vote aye. The motion carries. The minutes are approved. There is no new business, so we'll move on to the Board of Adjustment and approval of the August 22nd, 2022 meeting minutes.
I'll do the, this is Ken, I make a motion, we approve the August 22nd meeting minutes for the Board of Adjustment.
This is Mark, I'll second that.
I have a motion by Ken, a second by Mark to approve the August 22nd, 2022 meeting minutes. Timothy, how do you vote?
This is Timothy, I vote aye.
Ken, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
Mark, how do you vote?
This is Mark, I vote aye.
This is Mike, I vote aye. The motion carries. We move on to new business. First is variance application 17-V-22 by Mike and Melinda Spry, lots 13, 14, and 15, Bannister, 5th Crow Wing Addition, Section 30, Township 140, Range 33, Nevis Township on 5th Crow Wing Lake, a recreational development lake, Parcel 21.48.01000. Applicants are requesting a variance from Section 704 of the Shoreland Management Ordinance to subdivide a substandard sized nonconforming lot from adjacent nonconforming lots in the same ownership and place it in a different ownership. If Mike or the Spry's present, please come to the table and state your name and address for the record, and then tell the board what you are asking for.
Okay, my name's Mike Spry. I live at 22705 Deep Woods Lane, Nevis, on 5th Crow Wing Lake. Our request is based on our plans to sell the original home there on lots 13, 14, and 15. We built a new home on the lots to the south. But we'd like to keep our access to the lake down there, and so our variance request is for splitting off lot 13 from 14 and 15 before we sell it.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board?
This is Ken. You also own the lot to the, I'll say, left as you face the lake from where the current buildings are. Why do you necessarily need lake access through this smaller non-conforming lot?
Well, if we sold lots, if we sold all the lots the cabin is on, what we call the cabin, the old house, that would eliminate all the access to the lake as it exists now. We own the 3 lots to the south up on the hill, but we'd rather not try to access the lake from there because it's a very high, steep bluff, and we don't want to disturb it necessarily. The water's more shallow there, and we probably have a hard time getting a boat in and out of there. And then you've got, it's adjacent to a lot of really good, high-quality wildlife habitat, and we don't want to disturb that if we can avoid it.
Okay.
Other questions or comments this time from the board? This time I'll open for public comment. Hearing none, we'll close public comment. This is Mike. I have a question. You have a current variance that's never been acted upon, is that correct?
Not that I'm aware of.
Eric, could you weigh in on that?
Eric speaking, yeah, there's a 1981 variance that was granted for lot 13, the lot in question, that would allow a residence to be placed there at a 75-foot setback from the ordinary high water mark, and for a drain field to be placed at a 125-foot ordinary high water mark setback.
The reason I ask that is I have no problems with your request, but I do have a concern that if we keep the 81 variance active, that then at some point that lot could be built upon. Would you be supportive of a condition that, for this to happen, the condition be that that lot cannot be built upon?
Yes, I would accept that.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
This is Tim speaking. I would agree with you, Mike, that as long as there's a condition that it can't be developed in the future, that I'd be in favor of the application. Would you, if you ever separated that, put a road around that shop on the? And
That would
have-
be one of the things we'd like to do if we were able to sell, is build the road, a new driveway around what we call the barn and back to the right-of-way back there, or the easement back there, so that we could create better separation between our place and the place, our former place, the place we would sell. That was one of the ideas one of the reasons why we were also interested in splitting off 13, so we could do that without having to create a bunch of easements and things.
Okay. So by doing that, you're not gonna confuse things with easements between buildings
Right,
through neighbors.
right.
Yeah, I have no problem with it.
Other questions or comment, or is someone ready to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. Okay. Make a motion that we approve this variance request with two conditions, that the lot 13 cannot ever be converted to a developed lot. It must remain as undeveloped. And the second condition is that variance 81-33 is voided.
This is Timothy, I'll second that motion, or are you gonna adopt findings?
Oh, yes, and yes, I would also add that accept the findings of fact of the Environmental Service Department.
And this is Timothy, I'll second that motion.
We have a motion by Ken and a second by Timothy to approve with two conditions: that the lot can never be developed and that variance 81-33 be null and void. Timothy, how do you vote?
This is Timothy, I vote aye.
Ken, how do you vote?
This is Ken, I vote aye.
Mark, how do you vote?
This is Mark, I vote aye.
This is Mike, I vote aye. The motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on is the variance application 22-V-22 by Margaret Cox, Lot 18, Block 1, Friendship Springs, Section 33, Township 143, Range 32, Lakeport Township on Kabekona Lake, a recreational development lake. Parcel 19.41.02000. Applicant is requesting a variance from sections 501.2, 501.7, 1001 and 1003 and 1005 of the Shoreland Management Ordinance and Section 7 Subdivision B, 4, and 11 of the Subdivision Ordinance to subdivide a lot into two lots. One proposed lot does not meet the minimum lot area requirement. Both lots do not meet the following requirements: minimum lot width at 100 feet ordinary high water mark, setback, minimum buildable area, and minimum lot width at the rear of the line. Will the applicant or representatives please come forward and state your name and address for the record, and then tell the board what you're asking for.
My name is Margaret Cox. My address of this property is 30224 County 37. My residence is 2040 West Wayzata Boulevard, Orono, Minnesota 55356. I'm asking for a variance to divide the lot into two lots. Currently, our family cabin is on the lot that you can see on the bottom of the screen. And the proposed lot would be the other part of the lot on the top part. And I would like to divide the property so that each of my daughters will have a lot instead of having the one property for the entire family.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? At this time, I'll open for public comment. Public comment, please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and also write it into the log, and then explain to the board what your comments are.
Thank you. My name is David Winterstein.
I'm Carrie Winterstein.
We live at 521 9th Street South in Moorhead. We are also the property owners of the lot that you see immediately to the north here. And I can look that address up if you'd like. I don't have it in the top of my head.
You're referring to lot 17 that we're seeing?
Correct. 30244.
30244 is our fire number.
Is there a microphone there?
Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Oh,
sort of.
yes.
But shouldn't a microphone there for recording?
It's there, Ken.
It's there, it's
Oh,
hanging.
Yep.
hey, yeah. Can't hear and can't see, so.
So go ahead, whoever's going to make the
Sure.
comments, if you would be as close to the microphone as you
Sure, we can
be.
do that. Well, first of all, I just want to say that these properties have been in our families for 90 years. And so that we, my grandfather and Mickey's father were part of the original people who built here. And so we've got a long time going back together. And it's Friendship Springs is what we've called it. And I think that is a name that fits well.
And so we just want to acknowledge, we know from personal experience and through several generations how challenging it is to hang on to these family properties on the lake and pass them from generation to generation in an equitable way, but also to be really good stewards for future generations. That's that we take that particular part of our responsibility very seriously, even as we look ahead. And we are relatively newly the owners of that property, partly because we're in that place as a family where David's parents can no longer do a lot of the maintenance, and so it is now our responsibility. And we think of it as the way that we steward the land for hopefully our children and grandchildren, the way our David's grandparents did.
So we're here speaking in opposition to this, that we have there are two things that I want to lift up from the staff report that I think are really notable here. The first one talks about the harmony, and the staff report notes that the widths are inadequate and that the square footage, particularly of the north lot, falls short of the minimum square feet, and that is by 20% that it's falling short. It only has 4/5 of the square footage it should have. And the staff reports notes in this area that the septic is limited, and you can kind of see that here, how tight it is, that the overall space is not enough. One of the things that might be a little difficult to note just from looking at something like this is what the land looks like. So near the road on the right-hand side of the screen, as you see here, the land is relatively flat. There is some slope to it. And then it falls away pretty steeply before it gets to the lake. And then down by the lake, you can see where their cabin is, it's flat once again. So there is quite a bit of topography here. And the challenge there for the septic is where does that drain field go and where does it flow? And in particular problem in this case, and it doesn't really show up in this photo, but one of the things that our lots share is a spring. That there's a large spring area, though, these free-flowing artesian springs that just flow out of the ground and into the lake. But they are not right at the edge of the lake. They go back for 20 or 30 feet. So that even shortens the distance for that drain field to flow down that steep hill before it hits the watershed. The kicker on all this is that for our property, we use that spring for drinking water. we go down to that spring and dip out the drinking water that we're going to use in the cabin. And if their septic is to flow into that spring, it would void that. The second challenge that the staff report lifts up is the maintaining the essential character. And I think you can see from this photo how woodsy it is, and you can see some of the roofs of our buildings there, and that right now we can't see our neighbors. And that is part of the character of this property, that we have distance from each other and there's space. Another thing you can't see on this photo is that there is a path that runs along the lake, so that these places are all connected. Children and grandchildren can share it, but that each of the places is separate from each other. And that is an essential part of the character that we think needs to be maintained. And if something is built up on the hill right by our property line, it's going to devalue our property and change the character of the whole area, not just for us, but for the other neighbors and for things going forward. So I think at the end of the day, when we, yes, sir.
3 minutes, so if you could wrap up, please.
Thank you. This is my last thing. Thank you for your time. And I think at the end of the day, when we think about what our lake property is like, or what other places are like when we go to, if we go down to the Twin Cities metro area, there is a palpable difference in how these properties feel and how they operate. And we want ours to stay the character of Kabekona Lake, not a metro area lake home. Thank you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Hearing none, we'll close public comment. Would you like to respond to the public comment?
I guess all I would say is that over time, things can change. Initially, my father had this large lot in comparison to a number of the lots on the lake, which were, the cabins were built much closer together. And I guess all I can say is that I believe that things, can change. And my thought is, my feeling is that my family would really like to stay on Kabekona, and each of my daughters would like to have a lot. The current cabin is down quite a steep hill, which is prohibitive as far as winter access, and is currently not water winterized. It's got heat, but so one of my daughters is interested in building something in the future, not any near future, but in the future, that they could live in, more than just the summer months, perhaps.
Thank you. This is Mike. I have some concerns. We have a lot that on the surface looks like it's quite adequate as a lot, but when you divide it into two, we have some issues, especially when we look at the topography, buildable area, things like that, and the ordinance, is fairly specific against substandard lots being created for the protection of the water in the lake. And so I have some issues, and my inclination is this is not a good move to allow. Other comments or public comment?
This is kind of a question. You in two lots, but the road that currently accesses it kind of winds over the north lot and then onto the south lot.
Right.
And then ends up on the north lot, which is not the lot that the house would be. What's the thinking about road access?
Well, I don't think we've even talked about that, but at some point, probably, there would have to be two separate driveways. And I guess I didn't think of this before, but to respond to what Mike commented, or I guess what Winterstein's commented on, was the septic, and I had a septic compliance study done. Ed Aletto found a secondary site for the current cabin for a drain field, and he found two sites that would be acceptable for the new lot, a primary and then a secondary.
This is Timothy speaking. Yes, to address his worries, septic systems are put in at a separation of soil that treats the septic, that your sewer goes to the lake too, after it's went through soil, and it's been cleaned up. So there has been work on that, and that fits. Myself, I don't have a problem with it only being 65 feet in the back, even though our ordinance says 75. And there probably, you could probably build something to fit there, but I have a problem with the hill. I have a problem, I think it would be problematic for another residence in that hillside on that lot. I have a question for Eric. Since it's mainly just to satisfy two people that want to share the property, would this fit to have a duplex? Do you think?
Just a second, let me get back to the survey.
What do you mean by a duplex?
I'm saying two separate houses on one property with one owner, with two owners, without the property line being, so in the future, it doesn't turn into two separate huge families taking two little undersized lots.
Yeah, to your question, Tim, Eric speaking, the
No, doesn't mean
combined lot area would be
it's 72.
7,500 square feet, roughly shy of the 80,000 square feet necessary.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they need a variance for that or have to apply for one.
You would be able to put a guest cottage on the lot, though, if you wanted to.
This is Ken. One observation, first of all, an observation that the current structures on the lake are non-conforming. And, but the second thing is the second lot, the one to the north, the smaller one's undersized, the entire shoreline, to me, would be very problematic to have, let's say, a dock for boat access, lots of big, nice cedar trees, wet area. You'd almost have unusable area in the shore impact zone. It doesn't seem to me it would be a very desirable lot, or might even be not right for the shoreline to do any access off of that lot, as I look at it. I guess maybe the other comment is, it is really very, this is a fairly significant variation for both of these lots, and it's very clear that to create two non-conforming lots is just not in harmony with what the intent of the shoreline management ordinance is. So,
Other questions or comments from the board?
Mike, I'll just weigh in here if that's okay. I kind of concur with what I'm hearing from my co-members here on the board, and just wondered if you heard Eric's suggestion about a possibility of a guest cabin.
Well, that would
as
defeat
an
the,
option for
that would
you.
defeat the purpose of the people that want to build. They don't, they want a cabin that's more than a guest cabin.
Okay,
That they would, their family would be able to come
Right.
to.
right.
And as far as the shoreline, we have people on our side of the lake that have quite a more complex set of stairs that go over some wetlands and go down to the lake. Right, actually toward the, if you're looking at the lake, to the right of the lake, right by the point. There's a cabin that has quite a bunch of stairs that go down, and they go over some of the wetland. So I think it's possible to put, to have access to the shoreline.
Other questions or comments? And I'll make a motion. This is Mike. I'll make the motion to deny and to accept the staff findings of fact.
And this is Mark, I'll second that motion.
A motion by Mike, second by Mark, to deny and accept the staff findings of fact. Timothy, how do you vote?
This is Timothy, I vote aye.
Ken, how do you vote?
This is Ken, I vote aye to the
Mark, how do you
motion.
vote?
This is Mark, I vote aye.
This is Mike, I vote aye. Motion carries. Application is denied. Thank you. Next, we have variance application 23-V-22 by the Kern Family Enterprises LLC, part of the southeast quarter of the southeast quarter, Section 12, Township 140, Range 33, Nevis Township, Parcel 21.12.02940. Applicant is requesting a variance from Section 4 of the subdivision ordinance to further subdivide a property by administrative subdivision within the 5-year waiting period from a prior administrative subdivision. Please step forward and state your name and address for the record, and then explain to the board what you're asking.
My name is Gerald S. Kern. My address is 109 14th Avenue West, West Fargo, North Dakota. The address of the property that we're talking about is 20119 Flying Eagle Drive, Nevis. My ultimate goal would be to do or ask for an administrative subdivision. I guess what the variance is about is the request to waive the 5-year waiting period to do so. And I guess if that would be approved, then I would resubmit the administrative subdivision paperwork.
Questions or comments from the board?
When the original administrative subdivision thing was done a few years ago, why didn't they plat these or designate these lots then, rather than coming back now?
I had Kevin Lindahl handle that all at that time, and I was thinking that we had drawn it up, and I don't know if it was a part of that application, but I think it was denied because it was within the 5 years. That property this property, 10.5 acres, had just been subdivided when the Flying Eagle Storage Building was sold. And that's where the conflict came in. Is that accurate, Eric, would you say?
Ken, the prior subdivision application was submitted by another party
Okay,
a few years prior to the remainder tract being created, and then that's what Mr. Kern purchased and is now proposing to further subdivide.
okay.
Oh, there was another application then, okay, that I'm not aware of, all right.
This time I'm going to open for public comment. Hearing none, I'll close public comment.
This is Ken, just to make an observation. The intent of the limit on the admin subdivisions in the 5 years is so that people don't plan a process to avoid an overall platting process. But in this case, this no longer could be subdivided, and therefore it'd be the end of any admin subdivision activity. So I think the intent of the shoreland management ordinance is or subdivision ordinance, I think is in harmony with what they're proposing.
Other questions or comments from the board? And this is Mike. I'll make the motion to approve and accept the staff's findings of fact.
This is Mark, I'll second that.
A motion by Mike, a second by Mark to approve and accept the staff findings of fact. Timothy, how do you vote?
This is Timothy, I vote aye.
Ken, how do you vote?
This is Ken, I vote aye.
Mark, how do you vote?
Mark, I vote aye.
This is Mike, I vote aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is variance application 24-V-22 by Brian Wormley, part of Government Lot 3, Section 16, Township 141, Range 33, Mantrap Township on West Crooked Lake, a natural environmental lake, parcel 20.16.00110. Applicant is requesting a variance from Section 701 of the Shoreline Management Ordinance to alter a non-conforming use by placing a new rental unit where a previous structure existed. Please state your name, address for the record, and then explain to the board what you're asking.
Brian Wormley, 25951 County 86, Happy Days Resort. What we're doing is we've removed a number of mobile homes from our property and wishing to utilize the existing sewer capacity there and the water hookups and everything, and move in a cabin to the existing site. It's across the road from everything.
Thank you. This is Mike. It's my understanding that, correct me if I'm wrong, there were four mobile homes that have been removed already, and there's still one more on.
Correct.
Adjacent to the, where
Correct.
you plan on the cabin. And so you voluntarily reduced your density by removing those four trailers, and now you're asking for one, and
Right, right.
thank you. Other questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, I think when we were out there to discuss the possibility of that one remaining trailer home being removed when the current user no longer wants to use it.
As we've gone through, I mean, we've been there 30 years, but as we've gone through it, it's always been our intent to eventually move those manufactured homes off the property. And so that's always been our plan as we've gone through with the four that we've currently moved off. That resident, I haven't forced anybody to leave. I've let them live out, effectively, yes, live out their leases. And so that resident is up there in their age right at this
And the
point.
reason we talked about that, and I think that would bring, if that were removed at some point in time, would bring you back to the same number of units that you have now, which is 8. So you would not be increasing the number of units on your property if you build a new one and then someday get rid of that one.
Well, I have the resort, and then I have the manufactured side over there. And so I have 5 over there. I have 5 spots. And so, I have 8 cabins currently.
Yeah.
And so I go to 9, but I've moved off 4 of those existing. And I understand the capacity, the sewer capacity and the density and all. I understand all those rules as far as what I'm allowed to do.
At this time, I'm going to open for public comment. Hearing none, I close public comment. Other questions, concerns from the board? This is Mike again. I think generally speaking, I'm in favor of this proposal. The fact that you voluntarily removed 4 structures and decreased density gives me the impression that you're trying to move forward and do the right thing. I'm wondering if you would be acceptable to a condition that the existing manufactured home, as you refer to it, would be removed at the point I'm not sure how to term that, the current, is it a lease or a rental, ceases to exist.
Well, it's a year-to-year lease, what I've always had in all those different spots. And so, I mean, I don't know how are you saying that's a condition?
I would like to see a condition, and not, if it's a year-to-year lease, until the current leaseholder chooses not to renew or can't renew.
So I'm just asking, and so at the conclusion of that lease, then,
No, it can be, what I'm saying is, it's a year-to-year lease. You
Right.
can continue to renew that lease with the same individual, but once that individual is no longer renewing the lease, able to do it, that manufactured home be removed at that time.
how does that apply with my current license? Because I'm licensed for, I'm just stating as a fact, I'm a licensed for 5 manufactured homes currently on the site through the state.
Yeah.
But I understand the capacity.
The State Department of Health licensing is a separate matter from
Okay.
the shoreland ordinance and the consideration of the dwelling unit density. So what I hear the chairman suggesting would be kind of a one-for-one exchange for if this cabin would be allowed, they'd be open to allowing it to be constructed on the condition that if and when that party that's occupying that trailer
Right.
discontinues their lease, that the trailer be removed whenever that point is reached.
With no other stipulations?
Right.
Yeah, that would not preclude you for coming forward with some other proposal in the future. It's just saying that particular manufactured home would be removed in exchange, and what happens in the future is unknown. But
Right. Yeah. I mean, at this time, that's our intent, so yes. I mean,
Yeah, that's what you said on the site, so.
I don't have any opposition to that.
other questions or comments?
I have one.
Well, we've closed public comment.
My wife, but yeah.
Is
She's
she-
an applicant.
She's one of the applicants, then come forward. I'm sorry, I had to have that pointed out. I'm not clicking yet here.
I mean, I just,
You have to state your name.
okay, sorry, my bad. Heidi Wormley, I'm Brian's wife, and I'm just making sure this is clear. So you're asking that we remove, in order to get the variance, you're asking us to remove the trailer when Bernice decides to
Just names.
not, but you're not saying that we can't put something else there?
No, we're saying we would let you put something there now. You'd have to go through whatever processes are necessary, but we would grant that variance for you to put the cabin where you want. And the condition would be in the future, when the current leaseholder chooses not to renew or deceased and can't renew,
Right.
that at that point in time, the manufactured home is removed.
I think she's asking if they get rid of that manufactured home, can they replace it with another cabin? And that would be another variance.
Is that what you're asking?
Well, with our manufactured home license, we can put in 5 manufactured homes right now.
Well, not according to the shoreline ordinance. Don't confuse what the Department of Health is a completely different process that we have nothing to do with. And it doesn't matter if they say 5 or 16 or 1.
Okay.
We're going by what the shoreline management ordinance, and so they're two different entities. It does not preclude you, the condition does not preclude you from coming to the board and asking for a variance in the future to add something on that particular site or somewhere else. The density issue would have to be addressed, or is what we're really up against. But we're not saying you can't build what you want to build now on the site. We're just placing as a condition, further removing the density someday down the road.
And Eric, confirm this, the current shoreline management ordinance requirements would limit you in Tier 1, which is where your units are, to 7 units. So this would be up to 9 now, so you would still be 2 over density of the shoreline management ordinance. And with the manufactured home, it would be 10, which would be 3. So we're merely asking you to back off to 9, which is still 2 over what the shoreline management would allow you to have on your property from a density calculation.
But if we didn't
Is
get
that,
the,
I think I stated that correctly, yes.
You did.
Okay. So we're saying, yeah, you can build another stick cabin, but to keep the density in line, we're asking that in the long term, you will remove that manufactured home. And as Mike said, there's nothing preventing you in the future from coming back with a variance request for adding additional ones, but keeping in mind that you are over density for the shoreline management ordinance. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I mean, I'm just, because if we didn't take the variance, we could move in 5 mobile homes right now, right, with our shoreline?
No, you could not. You would have to ask for a variance to do that. Once those manufactured homes were removed, now, what was there from the shoreline management ordinance is null and void. What we have now is one manufactured home, and you're asking for an additional cabin which exceeds density, which it sounds like we're willing to okay.
Okay, I see. I understand now. I got it.
Is anyone ready to make a motion? I can do it if.
You're good at it.
Okay, this is Mike. I'll make the motion. We approve the request and accept the staff findings of fact with the condition that when the current leaseholder of the remaining manufactured home chooses not to renew or cannot renew, that manufactured home be removed.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Mike, a second by Ken, with the condition on the manufactured home be removed after the current lease holder no longer renews or cannot renew.
Did you accept the findings of fact?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Timothy, how do you vote?
This is Timothy, I vote aye.
Ken, how do you vote?
This is Ken, I vote aye.
Mark, how do you vote?
This is Mark, I vote aye.
This is Mike, I vote aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next, we have variance application 25-V-22 by Sherry and Spencer Pribble, lots 1 and 2, Hudson Bay, section 11, Township 141, range 32, Akeley Township on Big Bass Lake, a recreational development lake, parcel 01.41.00200. Applicants are requesting a variance from Part 1 of Section 702 of the Shoreline Management Ordinance for a proposed lakeward addition to a non-conforming dwelling unit located in the shore impact zone, and Part 2, Section 502.2 of the Shoreline Management Ordinance for a proposed accessory structure that will not comply with the side lot and road right-of-way setbacks. Applicants, please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and then tell the board what you're asking for.
Good evening. My name's Spencer Pribble. The subject property address is 31759 Ibis Drive in Akeley. Our permanent address is 8055 North High Branch Drive in Tucson, Arizona. And as mentioned, we're asking for a variance for a build-out on the front of our cabin towards the lakeside, approximately 6 by 10 in dimension, on the older part of the cabin where it's not, it currently sets 6 feet back from the rest of the old part of the cabin, so it'll bring the whole front of the cabin basically flush on the whole lakeside. And then secondly, removing 2 structures, a garage and a shed, and constructing a larger garage on the same general area.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? This time I'm going to open for public comment. Seeing none, hearing none, I will close public comment. This is Mike. A couple of things, I guess, to me, the new addition is a very small, and it just evens out the front there. Is not a major concern. And even the setbacks for the proposed garage don't overly concern me. What does concern me is the overall drainage in the lot. Right now, you could see some areas where there's obviously some runoff, especially with these events that we've been seeing more and more frequently. I guess my concern would be is that I think what we need here is some type of drainage plan that would include how the proposed addition, the existing house, and the garage would drain and be guttered to assist in draining, because we're adding quite a bit of impervious surface. While it's within the parameters of the ordinance, what you're proposing, I do see a concern with the drainage.
Well, we share your concern as well. Particularly this last season, we've had quite a bit of rain on the west side of the property, which you could see when you did your site visit. So on that view right there, so what my thought is, that chimney is going to come out, and then when we bump out the front of the cabin to be flush there, is right now the one piece in the very left-hand corner of that picture, there's no gutters. So that all comes down to the front of the cabin. I do have quite a bit of no-mow area in front of that, and pencil reeds and that kind of thing to keep it off the going into the water. But my thought is then I would run a gutter from the west side of the property to the east side and drain out over to the edge, right edge of the house. See where the little drain spout is. Get that a little further to the east, and there's a significant amount of foliage in there to help mitigate that. And then with the construction of the garage in the back, that's my biggest problem. The watershed coming down just to the east of the garage and shed towards the house. And then further to the west, there's an approach where the water comes down, and that's got no vegetation and a straight shot down to the lake. So I'm hoping with the construction of the garage is to move that watershed to the west a little bit, and to the west of that approach, closer to the drain field, and keeping it where I've got some foliage and everything to the west of the property.
I appreciate your comments. I guess what I see here is intent with no plan. I guess what I'd like to see is a drainage plan drawn up as a condition of approval on these two requests. And once the drainage plan is approved by Environmental Services Office, you could then be issued the variance and the necessary permits that you need. That's just my thoughts.
This is Timothy. I agree with you, Mike, especially even across the road we were looking, the whole thing drains to your property. And so I agree that we should see a stormwater management plan laid out of where I believe it's, 1 inch rain per, whatever the calculations are for that.
Eric, can you help us with that?
Well, I can give you some ideas, but when you set a stormwater plan to be based on a certain type of rain event, then you have to be real specific with 1 inch over what time period, because there's all kinds of ways that those calculations can be performed, and it drastically affects how the system is designed and what its capacity is. So 1 inch over 24 hours is very different than 1 inch in like a 1 hour time period. So I'd be as specific, if you're targeting larger rain events that happen in a short duration, I would be more specific that way as opposed to a 1 inch over a 24-hour
We
period.
use in the past when we've done that. I don't remember now.
Do you recall, Eric, in the past?
I don't, I'd have to go back and look.
And I guess I'm wondering, in a stormwater management plan, is there a standard that they would put into play if nothing is specified?
No, the first question we get from the engineers when they're tasked with doing that is to spell out, is it 1 inch over what period of time? And so it's, I often don't have that level of detail for
I don't
them.
know if I can, hold on here. It'll take, this is a similar one that we had. I don't see on here. This basically specified the infiltration trench capacities, but it didn't. This is the Wolf Lake one here. The Wolf Lake one that we did, they used it, if you used the 10-year event, it dealt with 3.5 inches over a 24-hour period.
3.5?
Yeah, 3.59, 3.6 was the way the calculations went.
Over
If we picked
20.
the 100-year one, which none of us would see. Hold on here. Yeah, if we took the 10-year event, that'd be about 3.5 inches in a 24-hour period. Was one of the benchmarks.
I think that would be reasonable. Others on the board?
I agree. This, Tim.
So, Mike, just clarification, we would be the arbiters of that as far as making that decision to hand to an engineer to do this calculation? And is it, I'm gonna ask you just, is a typical solution like a rain garden?
Rain garden or some kind of volume collection thing.
Okay, okay.
And just diversions and the whole thing, I guess what I'm asking for is a professional stormwater management plan that would cover 3.5 inch event, rainfall event over 24 hours. While that wouldn't cover everything, it would be a vast improvement over what we hear there, and the Environmental Services Office would be the recipient to make the decision at that point that, yes, this is good, and be able to move forward then.
Okay.
I'm sorry, excuse me, what's a rain garden? I'm not familiar with that.
You'll see them, people create them, sometimes they're slight depressions that collect, and within their plants that thrive in wet conditions and then help to absorb any moisture that comes in. It's just one technique that many that could be included in a stormwater management plan. You're doing a good job currently with the lake shore as far as no mow, and it appears that natural vegetation, which also helps, that is often a component of a stormwater management plan on lake shore. So there's many different variables based on this particular event, your topography, the amount of impervious surface and everything else. So we don't know if that would be the solution.
I was gonna say, if you could go back to the drawing, you see these two light green areas in the drawing up here? They're basically infiltration areas the little pond area or depressed areas where the water runs to and then infiltrates into the ground. Some people make those into rain gardens, meaning they plant certain vegetation and stuff in them decoratively. The key thing, it's an area that temporarily holds the water so that it can seep into the ground. And they would do the calculation if they took your area, your impervious surface, took the area and calculated how much water in 24 hours would come off. And then they would design that pond, if you will, or that depression area to be able to hold that amount while taking into account how fast is it filtering away. We've done this in a few other cases where there was strong concern for the runoff.
Mike again, and part of maybe our rationale for requesting this would be that the applicant is increasing the amount of impervious surface over what he currently has. Is that, would you concur
In my
with
mind, it's
that?
twofold. To concur with the amount of impervious surface increase, but also on the site visit, seeing that there is an existing problem, at least based on, and I don't know how much rain came and how many hours, but you could see where there's runoff and potential issues of it getting to the water, and that would be my concern.
Okay.
Other questions or comments from the board?
Would we want to defer this, or table it while that's done, or pass it with the idea that he would have to come back for a plan to environmental services?
I would be in favor of, myself speaking, of approving it under the condition that a stormwater management plan be submitted to the Environmental Services Office, and once they okay that, then they can move forward as being approved.
But even though they have a plan, we want them to judge whether it's adequate. Should that not be our responsibility?
Right, they have to submit it to Environmental Services.
Okay.
With the 3.5-inch rain in 24 hours.
Correct.
Yeah, but implying that 3.5 inches, 24 hours, that whatever depressed area or holding areas are put in place, it could hold that. Is that are, and anything more than that would be allowed to run off? I mean, is that I think Eric's gonna say, what criteria are you guys giving me for what's gotta be done?
I think the criteria is 3.5 inches over 24 hours.
Right.
That there would be adequate holding area to hold that amount.
That would be, in my mind, the engineer's problem to work out.
Yeah, because when I look at his drawings to the east, if he had a long enough gutter system, that's very heavily vegetated. I'm not so sure that's an issue. It's the garage and everything comes down and runs off to the west,
Right,
right?
and
To the west, that
Not
to me
all
is
of
the
the
bigger.
existing house drains to the east. What he's proposing on the addition and that side drains to the east,
Yeah.
but the opposite side of the house, to my knowledge, does not, drains a different direction. So I want the entire property assessed, including what, as Tim noted, across the road, which is draining onto your property. That volume is all part of a stormwater management plan.
Okay. Under the assumption he can come up with a plan that doesn't cost $1 billion, would we be better off tabling it? I'm just asking the question, tabling it so that when he comes back, he said, I can't quite make that, but this is what I can do and make sense. We'd say, yeah, that's probably okay, good enough. The way we would make the motion the way it is, Eric's staff doesn't have that freedom, right? Or if he's okay with that,
It would be, Eric speaking, it would be much easier for staff if you want it to be submitted able to be constructed contingent on that plan being submitted, I'd want it spelled out that it's a plan prepared by a licensed engineer for 3.5-inch rainfall over a 24-hour period, and then you'd want to spell out, do you want that plan to only treat the runoff from the impervious surface on the lot itself, or do you want it all encompassing, as Mike was mentioning, for treating the stormwater that the entire lot sees? Those are two very different things.
I think as I think through this, is it's probably dealing with the impervious surface on the lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we can maybe specific on that 3.5 over 24, knowing that there is other runoff potentially coming off, from off lot to the lot. But this plan with the vegetation and everything else, healing what he wants to heal already, I think alleviates my major
Okay.
concerns about the runoff.
3.5 inches, 24 hours, the amount of water that comes off of the impervious surface of the existing home and addition, plus the new garage.
And a licensed engineer.
Huh?
And a licensed engineer.
A licensed engineer, yeah, okay.
And then
And
if
you're
the-
okay then, if we approve it under those conditions, that you would give final approval? I'm okay with that.
And then if the applicant wanted to, at that time, they could also ask the engineer to design additional to treat other issues on the property related to stormwater, but that would be the minimum that you'd require for the issuance of the structure permits.
Okay.
And
Just-
then,
Excuse
go
me.
ahead.
One point of clarification. So on the 1960s portion, right now, see the little indention on the north facing? That actually drains to the west. When I put new gutters on, I'm gonna take all the gutters from the old portion, the 1960s portion, and have them go to the east. So it'll only be the newer portion, the 1980s portion, that will drain out to the west.
So everything on the whole house is draining to the west?
On the top portion, on the new portions,
The lake side?
on the old 1960s, there's no gutter on the old part. There's only where the proposed construction is, that 10-foot section is the only one with a gutter. So when I extend that bump out there, then I'm gonna put a gutter from basically where the deck is and have all that go to the east. But I'll probably it'd be too long of a run to take the whole 1980s portion, I think, and run it that way.
And I guess that's what we're asking for, is the plan, that how you're going to deal with that impervious surface, all of it in its entirety, plus the new garage. And so I think we're saying the same thing. How it's accomplished, that's, we can't decide that. We don't have a plan before us.
Yeah, well, I've had a contractor, the excavation person I use, he just came out when I had the septic inspection to pump the tank out, and I talked to him for 5 minutes about that round area there. That's the extent of the conversation that I've had with anybody that has any knowledge of it, other than what I have in my mind, so.
That's why I think we're at least in my mind, why I'd like to see a stormwater management plan here.
Eric, is there any lists of people that are licensed to do that you know of, or do I have to just try to search for myself? Is there a resource within your office?
We don't maintain a list of licensed engineers, but I would imagine an online search would yield some leads pretty easily.
I just didn't know if you had a list somewhere, because for the septic inspectors and that kind of thing.
Do for the septics, but not for others.
No, you.
Okay, with that, I'm going to make a motion. This is Mike. I make the motion that we approve the variance application, accept the staff findings of fact, and the one condition be that a stormwater management plan be drawn up by a licensed engineer that covers all impervious surface existing or that's going to remain, and any additional impervious surface that's approved by this application, and it cover a 10-year event or 3.5 inches of rain over 24 hours. I do believe I said a licensed engineer. Do I have a second?
This is Mark. I'll second that.
I have a motion by Mike, a second by Mark to approve and accept the staff findings of fact under the one condition that a stormwater management plan be provided to the Environmental Services Office by a licensed engineer to cover all impervious surface that will be on the lot, including what's approved by this variance request, and that would be a 10-year event, 3.5 inches over 24 hours. Timothy, how do you vote?
This is Timothy, I vote aye.
Ken, how do you vote?
This is Ken, I vote aye.
Mark, how do you vote?
This is Mark. I vote aye.
This is Mike, I vote aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Next, we have variance application 26-V-22 by Milton and Vicky Hanson, Lot 7, Block 2, West Wind Addition, Section 9, Township 141, Range 35, Arago Township on Hay Creek. A tributary parcel 02.47.00800. Applicants are requesting a variance from Section 502.7 of the Shoreland Management Ordinance for a proposed platform and hot tub to be located within the 150-foot ordinary high water mark structural setback. Applicants, please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and then explain to the board what you're asking for.
My name is Milton Hanson. Address is 12163 Image Drive, Park Rapids. My wife is also here with me. We are asking a variance to put a cement slab, 12 by 13 cement slab, to hold a 7 by 7 hot tub as prescribed by a doctor for my wife's back issues. Where we'd like to put it is the most logical and practical place for access to the tub and to the house.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? This is Mike. I'll ask a question. When we were on site for the visit, there's an existing slab that runs the length of the home underneath the deck on the upper level. Why can't that 7 foot by 7 foot hot tub be placed on that existing slab next to the house?
The removable cover also requires 32 inches of clearance. So to place the hot tub in an area, well, first of all, the hot tub would not fit between the pillars.
What's the distance between the pillars?
I believe it's a little bit less than 8 feet, and by the time we have the posts for the removable top, it won't fit through. We had the representative for Hot Springs Spas come out and measure everything up for us, and he said it just won't fit there.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments?
Eric, excuse me, could you bring up that site plan again there and give me a distance? No, the aerial photo from the front of the house to approximately that wetland there, just the OHW.
It's 103rd, 105th.
Okay, thanks.
At this time, I'll open for public comment. Hearing none, I'll close public comment. Other questions, concerns?
This is Tim speaking. That's one of the issues. I walked down there and, it's real deceiving what it's looking like there, but, I just don't see I mean, it's called there, but they're being penalized for some wetland that I believe a previous administration called it at a different location. And it's called different today, and now we're into a spot where we're needing a variance. Myself, it's a flat spot. I
This
don't
is
see-
Ken, yeah, I'm in agreement with you, Tim, that when you look at it, you know, it's a river, so it's supposed to be 150 feet setback, but there's a long wetland area. This encroachment, river-wise, whether it technically doesn't meet the setback, there's virtually no impact to that river, especially with the heavy vegetation that's down next to it. And there's no neighbors or in any direction that this would be a visible problem.
Right.
So technically, it's maybe doesn't meet the requirements, but clearly the intent, I think it's probably satisfies it. It's not a huge thing, what, 12 by 13, 150 some square feet of
Right.
concrete and then the hot tub on it.
Other questions or comments?
Mike, this is Mark. I concur with both those guys on how I feel about this. Yeah.
And based on seeing it and the manufacturer saying it wouldn't fit where I would like to see it, it just isn't possible. I think this is also a reasonable request. Is someone ready to make a motion?
I just wanted my other comment, you know, there is a deck up above that's quite sizable, but I don't think 5,000 pounds of water in a hot tub, that structure is, I wouldn't put it on there.
No, either
Put
would
it
I.
that way. Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve the variance. I will have to do findings of facts. I think, is the variance in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the official controls? I say while the 17 by 30 deck is a feasible location, the structural strength is a concern. Any other locations on the property, at least from my observation, very inconvenient. The location is not visible from the river or from neighbors. Buffer exists by the river. I think therefore the intent is in harmony with the official controls. Is a property owner proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the official control? I would say
Yes.
that the current platform not sufficient is our deck, and the platform down below is not sufficient for the walk around and opening, and the river impact is negligible. So I believe it's a reasonable use. Item 3, due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the owner, house location, terrain, make location elsewhere on the lot not practical.
And heavy vegetation to the flowing river.
Yes. Okay. And 4 and 5 accept the staff's findings of fact.
This is Mark. I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Ken and a second by Mark to approve, and finding the facts have been addressed. Timothy, how do you vote?
Timothy, I vote aye.
Ken, how do you vote?
Can I vote aye?
Mark, how do you vote?
This is Mark. I vote aye.
This is Mike, I vote aye, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have variance application 27-V-22 by Smith Family Partnership, part of Government Lot 9, Section 14, Township 141, Range 33, Mantram Township on East Crooked Lake, a natural environmental lake, parcel 20.14.02100. Applicant is requesting Part 1 and after-the-fact variance to amend the ordinary high water mark structure setback approved in variance 82-32 and Part 2 of variance from Section 702 of the Shoreland Management Ordinance for a proposed addition to a non-conforming dwelling located in the shore impact zone. Come forward, state your name and address for the record and explain to the board what you're asking.
Hi, my name is Jamie Harshaw. I am the contractor that's representing the Smith family. My address is 16328 Dovetail Road, Park Rapids. The property address in question is 26305 Heritage Road, Nevis, Minnesota.
Go ahead and explain then what the
So-
request is.
Basically, wish to amend the setback. It was measured incorrectly in 1982 when the original structure was built. They measured down the hill instead of horizontally, so it comes in at 64 feet instead of 70 feet. The second part of the variance was started, the whole thing is we want to put an addition on. Previously, the Smith parents had owned the property and used it. They have 3 children that all have their own families now that have since taken over as their parents are deceased now. And so they wish to put an addition on with a bedroom and bathroom area.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board?
This is kind of just comments in the observations. Clearly, the 64 was just a miscalculation, not an issue with that. The hill in front's very vegetated, so the fact that it's only 64 feet by the calculation, there is a lot of vegetation relative to the lake. And second of all, I don't see any place else on the lot that you could build what is not a very particularly large addition to a very small cabin. Translated, I'm in favor.
I would concur with Ken. This is Mike. Looking at the property and the site, I think it's a reasonable request. What happened is, I think, a mistake that's happened before of measuring incorrectly but in view of what the lot looks like and where it is actually buildable, a very limited area to build. I'd be also in favor, and probably the only condition I would put on it is that the lake side of the structure be guttered and directed away from the lake as much as can be.
Yes.
This is Tim, I agree with that, too.
You gotta do public comment.
I'll do public comment at this time. I need help reminding me. Hearing none, I'll close public comment. I'll make the motion that we approve both Part 1 and 2 and accept the staff finding of fact with the condition that gutters be placed on the lake side of the cabin and new addition and directed as much as possible away from the lake.
This is Mark, I'll second that motion.
We have a motion by Mike, a second by Mark, to approve both parts 1 and 2 with the condition that gutters be placed on the lake side of the cabin and directed away from the lake as much as possible. Timothy, how do you vote?
This is Timothy, I vote aye.
Ken, how do you vote?
This is Ken, I vote aye.
Mark, how do you vote?
This is Mark, I vote aye.
This is Mike, I vote aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I should have done with the findings of fact that they did all the after-the-fact ones too. I assume that
Yep,
gets
I
included.
included those, yes,
You did?
in the motion, yes.
Yeah, okay. Sorry.
It's okay. Keep me honest.
No.
Okay, we now have variance application 28-V-22 by Halo Properties LLC, part of Government Lot 3, Section 19, Township 140, Range 33, Nevis Township, on Lake Beltane, a recreational development lake. Parcel 21.19.02300. Applicant is requesting Part 1 and after-the-fact variance from Section 501 of the Shoreline Management Ordinance for a duplex to be located on a lot that does not meet minimum duplex lot size standards, and Part 2, a variance from Section 402, Item 13R of the Shoreline Management Ordinance to allow a duplex to be operated as a single short-term rental structure on a lot that does not meet the duplex lot criteria. Please state your name and addresses for the record and then explain to the board what you're asking for.
TJ Simon, my address is 18513 209th Avenue. Property address is 21996, County 80.
Brian Halley, 23682 County 80, and the address is 21996 County 80.
Thank you for your time. Obviously, we're between you and leaving tonight. We understand that, so thank you for that. And we wanted to just touch base on, we're requesting a variance for the lot to become duplex. Our understanding when we purchased the lot, it has sold twice since we've all known the property, and we assumed it was single family. There was a building permit given in 1987 that showed it was single family. In conversations with Eric at that point, obviously that was done in error. The septic system was installed after that in 1993 for a single family. Then there was 2 additional site visits by the county and no one talking as it being a duplex. So as we tried to bring the septic system up to code with being a 5-bedroom system, it was conversation between us and Eric's department where in that conversation, we had already went through the process. They were we basically were starting to waiting for the permit to come, and at that point, it was told to us that it is considered a duplex on the property. So we're working through that process to try to figure that out, and in that process of having contractors out there to try to figure out how we can do to add doors between the bathrooms and the electrical and wells and those types of things. We said, all right, let's go for the variance to see if we can make it a duplex first, in the understanding that if we chose to do a short-term rental, that we would only rent it as a single family. I mean, that was the whole point of it, put on there. We don't want to rent it out as a duplex, as 2 separate parties there. It would be understanding that it'd be a single family duplex. I mean, a single family home to rent out for short-term rentals.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board?
Have you priced out, looked at what it would take to qualify it as a single-family residence?
Without moving plumbings, but contractors out there to do, without having to move the plumbing and those types of things. The addition of the 17 by 20 on Lakeport, we had that, and that was in the 125 to 150 range to bring that in. We have not had contractors out to do anything else because we didn't want to start moving electrics, wells, and those types of things. We don't just want to add on to make it work. If we were going to add on, we'd want to make it into a full single-family home that is a functional single-family home, not just let's add a entryway to make a door into a bedroom. Let's make it a functional home that's working.
Eric, question for you. Could that addition be considered a guest cabin? even though it's attached to the other one, the fact that it's completely separate?
Eric speaking, the issue, Ken, unfortunately, is that with it having a common wall and both of them having entirely separate living areas, it meets the ordinance definition of a duplex.
Okay.
So that's why it's before you, as they've presented it. There isn't a way around it being under the duplex definition of the ordinance.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to open public comment, and we do have a number of written public comments, so those are already part of the record, so we don't want those repeated, but anyone wanting to make public comment, please come forward, sign in, and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Lori Carter, and in the summer, I'm at 22100 County 80. A few doors down from this, and in the winter I am in Des Moines, 13801 Summit Drive. I've been in the area since 1965. My parents purchased the land a couple doors down, and so I'm kind of familiar. In 2005, Paul and I bought the place that was next door to where my parents had been, and I grew up with Heberts. We played games, so I know the people who originally did it. I talked to the man who apparently did this duplex thing, and I had no clue about it. He stopped in to talk to us. But I will say that it's always been operated as a single-family home. I support that idea, and I appreciate your interest in that direction. I do not support a duplex idea, and the reason I can't do that is that there's a couple different reasons. One is Paul and I canoe past there quite a bit, and there's always been only one dock, maybe one boat, one thing. If you start saying this is a duplex, we don't know down the road who's going to buy this, what are they going to do, how are they going to do it, and all of a sudden we've got a situation like Island View, who was accepted, put in their duplexes, and we've never seen anybody swim down there ever. It is just full of docks and boats and things, and I get concerned because this is not a lot that's supposed to support that. And my Aunt Judy, when they came, and they stayed in the 1960s. They stayed at Dreamaway Bay, which is also along where the County 80 is now. They only had two places, and they were called a resort. And so I feel like, well, if we're renting out a duplex type thing, then really we're starting to look at resort. We don't have the owners being the principal people on there. And so those are the concerns that I have. And I received two of these because I bought the lot a couple doors down on the other side. So I received two, so I feel like my comments should count twice. But I mean, I understand. I can see what you guys are doing tonight, and I'm really actually very impressed. So I just appreciate, I know what you're doing is not an easy job. But I just want to make sure that you understand how, as a neighbor on both sides of the thing, how I view the property in between as we canoe by and appreciate the environment. It's a beautiful lake, you know that. You're nearby. So, thank you.
Thank you.
David Martin, 21916 County 80. I own 3 contiguous.
Okay, before we make comments, would you sign in, please?
David Martin, 21916 County 80. I own 3 contiguous lake lots that abut the property on the west side of the lot, about 360 feet of lakeshore. I knew the Heberts very well myself, and I remember that they had a lot of difficulty selling the property because a building inspector had declared it a tear down because of an abundant amount of dry rot. Eventually the property did sell, and I had a conversation with Mr. Fishman, who came over to introduce himself to me, and he said, I think I can fix it up and flip this. And I thought, well, great, he's gonna fix up the property. We don't have a problem with another single-family dweller living there. So I was rather shocked when I got the request for a variance that this was going to turn into a real estate deal, a rental deal. I had no idea that it was a duplex either. It's not that it even comes close to meeting the variance. I mean, it's a very modest sized lot, 100 feet. For a duplex, you would need 225 feet. That's only 40% of the way there. And I'm also concerned, it's beyond the purview of this committee, but a month does not go by that I don't get a call from a predatory real estate company trying to buy a townhouse I own in the cities, willing to pay cash, sight unseen, so they can turn it into a rental property. I think there's a lot of profit to be made in doing that, and I think it's an unhealthy trend. The crown jewel of the American dream has been home ownership. But with the changes in tax laws in the last 4 years, with real estate companies continuing to enjoy tremendous tax benefits and homeowners being unable to deduct mortgage interest payments, I think we're seeing a real shift in the direction of this kind of a trend, and I think it's quite unhealthy. So I'm delighted to have new neighbors. I'm delighted the property is being fixed up. But I would strongly object to it being allowed to be a duplex, and I'm also opposed to it becoming a rental property. And if one said that it had to be run as a single-family property, how would that be enforced? I mean, I would find it irresistible to ignore the doubling of my profit by running it as a duplex. How is that going to be monitored? And are there any penalties if one gets caught doing that? So these are some of the concerns I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am Mary Frenzel. I am one of 6 siblings who own the property just adjacent to this property.
Will you please
the Hale
state your
property.
address also for the record?
The property that I own with my siblings is at 22074 County 80. I personally live at 23202 Gandalf Trail, Nevis. So we, all of my siblings and I are strongly opposed to an after-effect designation as a duplex. The property is just way too small. It has always been intended and it's always been used as a single-family dwelling. It was bought by Halo as an investment property and not a home. And it will be sold by them when it's expedient for them. After it's sold, would it then be sold as a duplex? And would it be used as a duplex? And if it's approved as a duplex now, what's to keep them from renting it as a duplex in the future? The interior can be modified. The whole place was just remodeled in the last couple years. They might need to move plumbing and electric, but there are a lot of talented builders in this area. Or they could tie the 2 structures together on the south side of the structure as it is. In addition, I'm strongly opposed to Part 2. If used as a short-term rental, that would mean the duplex was approved. Who's going to provide oversight? And it's going to change the character of the neighborhood. Other issues involved is that I don't think anybody knows exactly where the property lines are, so it needs to be surveyed. And property lines need to be there if it's going to be a short-term rental. The garage may be over the property line, and the septic will need to be put in, so that's a concern. Overall, basically, the findings of fact answers just do not support a variance. Thank you.
Property line thing came up in the discussion. Could you have Eric's put that up? I wonder if that is an issue.
We'll put it up later, but that's for them to determine, not us.
Hi, I'm Julie Frenzel, and I am one of the siblings, along with Mary, who own the property at 22074 County 80, and that is where I live. And the first thing I want to start with is a big thank you for all the people that decided to implement and set up the rules and regulations that are determining what can be a short-term rental and what can't, because I think the intent was to help protect the land, the lake, and the neighborhood. The current owners of the property knew full well before they bought the property that it was too small on a lot. Well, I assume they knew because they're professional real estate people, and I was able to find the regulations for a short-term rental lot size, and I'm not in understanding why anybody would buy a property on a lot that is much, much too small, whether you call that property a duplex or a single-family home. Neither one meets the criteria for the lakeshore footage or the acreage that needs to be met for it to be a short-term rental. Did that make sense? No? Okay. So if somebody wants to run a short-term rental, I think they should buy a property that's on the size lot that meets the criteria for a short-term rental. And if it doesn't, and they can't, they're welcome to sell the property and buy a property that does meet the criteria. There's the concern about the lake, there's concern about the neighborhood, there's concern about the land. If this was a short-term rental, it would hold 10 people. That lot is much too small for that sort of activity on a regular basis. The shoreline on Beltane is got a big erosion problem, and the concern for the neighbors with how many jet skis would be there, how many boats would be there, how much wave action would be there on a lake that's already almost at record high levels. There's a lot of concern for the neighbors because the neighbors have all lived in their lots for 20-plus years, and we've all been friends and friendly all east and west of this property. This property has been rented once this summer, and it was done before licensing, and it was kind of a fiasco because the noise lasted until 4:15 in the morning. And as this great brochure says, please respect that your voices carry, you know? And so a lot that is not big enough for a short-term rental, the noise level is going to be a detriment to the neighbors. There's also concern, I'm also concerned because the new owners, why did they get an after-the-fact variance instead of before? I don't understand why it had to be after the fact. And how did they start septic work when the septic permit hasn't been approved? And how are they planning on meeting the septic setback requirements and the short-term rental boundary requirements when a survey hasn't been done? I don't know if they plan to do everything after the fact, or how the permitting plans for the new owners is going to work. But these are the concerns of myself, my siblings, and most of the neighbors that, this changes the dynamic of the neighborhood a lot. And I think the regulations for the lot size are there for protection of the land, the lake, and the neighborhood, and this doesn't match that even closely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Hearing none, I'm going to close public comment. Would you like to respond?
Sure, I'd love to. First off, we appreciate the feedback. I mean, it's one of those things, we live and work in this town, and we understand the challenges that go along with all this. I will tell you that we try to do everything right as the process goes. The reason it is an after-the-fact variance is because it happened prior to our ownership. It happened back in 1987, in fact, is when this happened. We understand that we don't want it to be a duplex. That's the only way we could get a variance to have this done right, is to be a duplex. If we could apply for a variance to say, let's make this structure a single-family home, this is the only variance we were able to allow to apply for, is to make it a duplex. Our intent is not to sell it as a duplex, but I understand that concern, that if all of a sudden it was to be sold and it's approved a duplex, what's the next person gonna do? What's the next board gonna allow? And we respect that part of it.
Mark?
Mike, question for the applicants. I thought you had made mention early on about what options you looked at to convert it from a duplex to a single family. Could you tell me again what those were?
So the only option that we looked at originally was adding on the 17 by 20 part of the Lakeport. Yep, in that spot right there.
And just cutting it across.
And just cutting it across and adding that to make, it's 5 bedrooms in there. It's been 5 bedrooms. There's 2 lofts, 2 bedrooms on one side, and a bedroom below. That's what the bed's configuration is, the same bed configuration as when we bought it.
And did you look at the entry area of, I guess, the original building there, where you maybe would put an addition, a little entry area there where you could gain access to both?
We looked very hard at that, to trying to think that would be the best option, but an entry point through the bedroom and the flow of that process to get into that property changes the whole dynamic of that property, where it would make more sense if you're gonna have a single family, the flow should be through the living rooms. And then the well is right, you can see where the well is, and that water line runs all the way up to the water pump. In order to put a roof there, there's 2 windows above that, so we'd have to change out all the windows, we'd have to change out everything, and then move plumbing and electric.
Okay.
So I appreciate that, because we spent hours out there trying to figure out the best way to do that.
I get it. I'm thinking you're gonna have to do some sort of remodeling
And this
one
was
way or
after.
another if you were to try to make that conversion. Not telling you that any of it's gonna be easy. I was just
And
wondering about that.
Mark, this was after we found out it was a duplex, or that it was rated or stated as a duplex.
Okay.
My question, maybe Eric would answer this too, if we create that spot, if we can figure out a way where that water line is and to put a bedroom door in there, at that point, we meet everything. At that point, there is no need for a variance. Am I correct in that? If we make that a single-family home, there's no need for a variance for anything that we do.
That would be correct, other than because the structure's in the shore impact zone, if there's an addition that's necessary for that to happen, then that would need to go through a variance process.
Non-Lakeward still?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep, due to the fact the house is in the shore impact.
because the whole house is in there, okay.
Yep.
This is Ken, back to Mark's questioning. That space between where it says bath and bath, that's a bedroom, right?
No, it's access point down to the crawl space of what was the addition in 87.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
It's an access point down to the crawl space of that addition, that southerly addition that was put in 87.
It steps down into that.
There's no way you can make that an access point to the addition?
Well, you have electric panel on the wall right there. And then on that bath, it's your toilet and your shower and your sink on the southerly wall of that room.
And on the back side of it, right where you.
Yeah, right there.
On the other side of that is the kitchen, where that opening is. Yeah, right there. That's all the cabinets for the
Not
kitchen.
space to just make a walkway through there?
No. At like 2 foot. because I totally agree. If we could make that easy change, you know, you make that connected, then there would be obviously no need for variance at that point. You know, we wouldn't be sitting here today if it was.
I think we're pursuing this fairly strongly because it's clear, I think, to me that most of the people's comments are not so much the fact that the existing thing, whether they call it duplex or single family, is not the issue. It's that the overall intent is to make this into a rental property, 5 bedrooms on an undersized lot, which is going to have repeated renters week after week, therefore increasing the activity and kind of disrupting the intent of the neighborhood. I think that's what drives it. If there were not any intent to rent it as a short-term rental unit, I'm not so sure there would be much opposition to what's there. So we're looking for a way for you to make this a single-family unit, and I don't see it.
This is Mike. Well, I appreciate the fact that it's an after the fact, not of your doing, and that in fact there may have been mistakes made in the past, but what's before this board now is that it is a duplex. That's been determined, and the lot is very substandard in my mind to meet that criteria. So that's part one that we're dealing with. Part two, as far as short-term rental, I'm not going to determine, in my mind, it's not up to me to determine whether it should or shouldn't be. Does it fall within the ordinance, which is a fairly new ordinance that I believe was fairly well thought out, and the parameters set up to protect the environment, the lake. And so I'm having difficulties with this, realizing that financially, it's expensive to do things based on what it is right now. But again, I'm not sure how much that enters into my train of thought when, in fact, it's such a substandard lot, and that first part of it is very difficult. Should it have been called a duplex originally? Probably, but what we're dealing with now is it is a duplex and it's on a substandard lot, and should it be approved, or is there an obligation there to make it a single-family dwelling? That's kind of what I'm struggling with right now.
Yeah, this is Tim speaking. I agree with you, Mike. It's a duplex that I'm not in agreement with leaving. But I don't know what to do to fix it.
Yeah, I don't either.
Mike, is our only option here is if we deny this, if we were to move to deny this application, then it's incumbent on the owners, is that correct, Eric, to find a way to remedy the fact that it is a duplex with you? I mean, and then it's kind of out of our hands, it's up to them. Am I understanding the process there? So I think that's the question we have before us, is whether or not we're gonna either approve or deny this application, and then if we do, then it's in their hands again to remedy this.
Correct. Yes.
The question for you guys, if we say we'll modify and have it come southward from that entryway and figure something to do in that entryway area, whether it's 6 feet out, which would get you to that main wall, to come all the way back that 20 feet. and have to figure out the expense of that, is that could we get approval for that to make it a single-family home at that point then?
Well, can I?
Go ahead, Mark.
Mike, before we go any further with that, I'd like to again go to Eric here and see if I understood what he said earlier, that any modification to the building would perhaps require a variance because it's in the shore impact zone. Did I hear that right, or?
Eric speaking, any addition to the home, that's correct, would require a variance due to the fact the house is located in the shore impact zone.
Right. Okay, so.
And whatever they would propose would have to meet your requirements to ensure that it is a single-family resident.
Yeah, which is basically connectivity between the two halves internally, so you can pass from one to the other without having to go outside. You know, as I'm looking at the sketch, just an idea, I don't know if it's viable, would be with that goofy little space between the two bathrooms that's used for access to the crawl space, if that was made basically outside space and you made those exterior walls on the south end of the bathroom on the north portion and the north wall of the bathroom on the south portion, I don't know if that's viable, but then the two would not share a common wall.
So completely detach them?
Yeah.
But then you still have two, how does that solve us anything? We still have two dwellings on the property.
Then you would be looking at a variance for a guest cottage possibly instead of a duplex, which I don't know if the board sees any difference there or not, but.
We're no different. Yeah, I mean, I think we're at the point that we want to make it a single family. I don't think it's not our intent to rent it as a duplex. So to make it a single family, it's just economically to make it a single family is the challenge.
Right.
Well,
We're not opposed to making it a single family, or we don't want it necessarily as a duplex.
Right.
This is Mike. I appreciate that fact, but what we're dealing with here is ordinance. And I don't believe it's this board's duty to try to identify how to make this into a single-family dwelling. Is it possible? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I have no idea what the costs are or anything else, but again, I don't believe it's this board's duty to go down that road. It's simply that this should be a single-family dwelling. It's just such a substandard lot for a duplex that that precedent is not one I'm probably not willing to make, and I throw the ball into the owners to figure out what their next steps are.
But can we get it passed here that if we make the addition to make it a single family, we can move forward then at that point? So we can get a septic permit and those types of permits?
Alls we can deal with what is in front of us. First part is approve it as a duplex. The second part is contingent on the first part being approved. If the first part's approved, the second part can't be considered. So it may in fact be a longer process than you'd like to have it, but it looks to me, if I understand the situation, you'll be coming to this board to remedy the situation. And maybe there's a scenario where you don't have to, but again, that's not for this board to decide. Mark?
Mike, did you mean if the first part is denied, the second part can't be approved?
That is correct, is my understanding.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
Well,
Okay.
and if the first part were approved, it doesn't necessarily mean you could approve the second part.
And we gotta get past part one to deal with part two. Any other questions or thoughts from the board?
No.
I'll make a motion.
Mark?
Okay, Mike, I'm gonna make a motion that we deny part one. And I'll go over findings of fact here. So is the variance in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the official controls? And I have no, the lot does not meet minimum size requirements for a duplex and so would not be in harmony with the purposes and intent of the controls. 2, no, since the lot is below standard in size, it would not be a reasonable use given the number of occupants that could be using it as a duplex. 3, no, the need would have been created by the prior owner who constructed the addition in such a way that it is now defined as a duplex. 4 is also no, will the issue of a variance maintain the essential character of the locality? And I say no, recognize it as a duplex for rental purposes would most likely change the essential character of the neighborhood. And 5, I'd go with staff's recommendations.
I have one question before this.
I have a motion on the floor right now. I don't believe I can entertain any more comments. Is that correct, Eric? Or is that my call?
It's your call.
Finish up number
Okay,
5.
go ahead.
My only question is even if I want to put a door in between those two properties, I still have to get a building permit. And right now, there's no building permits that be provided to us. Am I correct in that?
Well, Eric can answer it, but I believe there is probably ways to do that. I'm gonna let Eric.
Without coming back here, if I just get a way to do
Yes.
a door, can I get a building permit to do that, to make it in conformity?
If you're doing work to the interior, only the interior, you don't need a permit.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion by Mark. Do I have a second?
Did you answer number 5?
Yes, you did.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
This is Mike. I'll second the motion. We have a motion by Mark to deny part 1 of the application and a second by Mike. We've identified findings of fact. Timothy, how do you vote?
This is Timothy, I vote aye.
Ken, how do you vote?
This is Ken, I vote aye.
Mark, how do you vote?
This is Mark, I vote aye.
This is Mike, I vote aye. The motion carries. The application, part 1 is denied. With part 1 denied, do we still need to do part 2, Eric?
No.
I would, just to be
Okay.
covered.
So part 2 is, make sure I get this correctly.
To rent it as a short-term rental as a duplex. Yeah.
Part 2 is to rent it as a short-term rental as a duplex. And this is Mike. I'll make a motion to deny. And the findings of fact, can I use the same findings of fact for the first one?
Potentially, it's hard for me to say for sure,
Okay,
Mike.
we'll go
just
through
because
them. Is the variance in harmony with the general purposes intent of the official controls? And answer no. The controls say it's only one rental unit per property, so it does not meet the, is not in harmony. Is the property owner proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by official control? And again, no, the official control is 1 and they're proposing 2, which is not permitted anywhere in the ordinance to my knowledge. 3 is the variance due to circumstances unique to the property and not created by current or prior owners, and I'd say no, it was built as a duplex, so that's where we're at today. Will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? Say no. The potential for 2 separate rentals on a substandard lot would greatly change the character of the area and potentially the watershed or the lake itself. Does the stated practical difficulties involve more than just economic considerations? I think yes to that is, it's more than economics, even though economics are cited. It's the difficulty in trying to configure this as a single-family home. Do I have a second?
Aye, this is Ken, I'll second.
Motion by Mike, a second by Ken to deny Part 2. We've identified findings of fact. Timothy, how do you vote?
This is Timothy, I vote aye.
Ken, how do you vote?
This is Ken, I vote aye.
Mark, how do you vote?
Mark, I vote aye.
This is Mike, I vote aye. Motion carries. Part 2 is denied. Thank you. Next, we move to miscellaneous. Does anyone have miscellaneous? Communications from staff about anything?
Eric speaking, we had the recent MCIT land use training that Mark and Tim were able to attend, and we shared those training materials with the rest of the board, so there's some good stuff in there to read through as time permits, some good pointers and refreshers on process. And only other thing I would have is, as far as what the October agenda is looking to be, probably similar in size to what you've seen this evening, and it will all be Board of Adjustment business. There won't be any Planning Commission items.
Okay. Anyone else have anything for the good of the order? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
This is Mark, I'll second that.
Motion by Timothy, a second by Mark to adjourn. Timothy, how do you vote?
Timothy, I vote aye.
Ken, how do you vote?
Ken, I vote aye.
Mark, how do you vote?
This is Mark, I vote aye.
Mike, I vote aye. Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.